Okay, hi there folks, this is part 2 of the basic Flash tutorial with your host Roger Quinn and my trusty offsider
Lyndall McGovern.
Okay, now just to recap, that's where we got to, and now we're going to introduce 2 additional parts to this and then work out how to export that as a shockwave file so that you can look at it on the web. Righto, moving along. What we're now going to do is import an externally created file into this Flash tutorial. And to do that, I'm going to start a new layer like we do with everything, move the playback head back to frame 1. I'm going to go and import to stage a graphic when it thinks about it. It's thinking, and there it is. Now I happen to have this file which is called swirl.swf sitting on my desktop. And I'm going to click it and I'm going to import it in just like that. And there it is. And you're probably thinking, well, you know, big deal. The only point in showing that is that it was a graphic that was created in Illustrator and exported directly from Illustrator as a shockwave file. So just to show you that if you're a fan, like I am, of drawing stuff in Illustrator, you can bring it directly in. Yes, you could draw that in Flash, I know that, but it's just to show you that you can also import things from other programs. Righto, moving along, we're now going to create a third type of automatic animation and just go through the usual process we did with all the other stuff, and that is to first of all create that as a symbol. So convert to symbol, it's going to be a graphic. I'm going to call that swirl. And now what I'm going to do is just see that it's sitting in position where I want it. So I'm going to go to move the playback head there to frame 15 before I do any motion tweens or anything. And I'm just going to move the little swirl so that it's sitting almost, you know, smack on the middle of that blue circle there. Okay, so if you've drawn your blue circle of similar scale to what we're doing here, you should find that that swirl sits quite happily on top of that. Okay, so if I move the playback head, our swirl is still not doing anything because we haven't put any motion tween. So we're going to do that as well, exactly the same way we did before. Okay, layer 3 is selected, which means our swirl is selected, and we're going to insert, and it is in frame 1. Okay, the playback head is sitting in frame 1. And I'm going to insert a motion tween, and then we're going to go to frame 15. Okay, as usual, nothing's happening yet. In frame 15, I'm going to click on the orange little thingy, and no, I'm not. I'm going to do that. I'm going to actually make sure that the orange swirl is selected, but I'm clicking on frame 15 in the layer. Okay, and this is very important because it's bringing up 2 different types of information. And this will confuse people, so I'll run through that again because it confused me. If in frame 15 I click on the orange swirl symbol itself, it gives me color effect and position and size. If I click on frame 15 in the timeline, and I've still got the symbol selected here, but I'm clicking on frame 15 in the timeline, it gives me information about ease and rotation and path and blah, 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 blah. And what we want to muck around this time with is with rotation. And I'm going to select the little bit there that says direction, and we'll use CW, which stands for clockwise. We could use counterclockwise, it doesn't matter, either way. And this is just a way of introducing automated rotation. Really good for anything that you want to show rotating around, like wheels or swirly things like we have. And I'm going to tell it that I want that to rotate 3 times, like so. And now exactly the same thing has happened as with all the other motion tweens. We've got a little diamond appearing in frame 15 to indicate that something has changed. So if now you hit the return key, you'll see that our swirl is ripping around like crazy.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
I reckon it is. I think it's brilliant. And if we sort of go back to frame 1 and just push that through very slowly, you see that it is indeed going through 3 360-degree rotations in a clockwise manner. So isn't that fantastic? So very quickly recapping there, we have got 3 different types of animation happening, all achieved using the same basic process of a standard motion tween. Righto, let's move on. Before we do, I'm going to name that layer. We'll call it swirl so that we know what we're doing. And now to introduce the last part of this actual sort of graphic construction part of this, and that is to add some type. We're going to use new layer once again, and let's just be really nutty here and change the name of the layer first. Call it type, because I know I'm going to put a type graphic on that. Righto, going back to frame 1. Now we of course do have some fabulous type tools built into Flash, and if you click on the type tool you'll notice that most of the type modification menu there on the right hand side is very familiar as it is in most other programs. So yes, this next bit you could probably create in Flash itself, but once again I was just trying to show this as a way of indicating you can indeed import graphics from other programs. So that's why we're going to import this bit rather than create it in the program. So we're going to do what we did with the swirl and go to File, Import, Import to Stage. Incidentally, if you choose Import to Library, it means it won't immediately appear on the stage. It will go into the library, whereupon you'll have to drag it into the stage. So that's why we're using Import to Stage. In this case, we want type. And there it is. And it's a fairly simple type graphic created in Illustrator. And what I want to do with this one, whoops, is not move the letter O. Now, let that be a lesson to you kids out there. That thing is not yet a symbol. So that means that I can accidentally click on individual parts and it will move them around. So it reminds me to do what I've done with all the rest of it and turn that into a symbol. And it's a graphic once again. And I'm just going to call it type or graphic or something like that. That'll do. In fact, I won't call it graphic because that would confuse it with the type of symbol that it is. So I'm just going to leave that as graphic and call it type. And there we are. And then I'm going to move it somewhere over here for the moment and then do exactly what I did with the swirl. Move everything to frame 15 and make sure that that's sitting where I want it. Now, I'm just going to scale this thing up. And I'm just using the arrow keys to sort of nudge that around on the stage. And I'm going to go to this little tool in the toolbar that's 3 selectors down. We've got the selection tool, we've got the sub selection tool, and this thing is called the free transform tool. I'm going to use that. You can rotate stuff, but I'm going to use it to scale. And once again, if you hold shift, that will constrain the graphic to maintain the proportions of the original thing, like so. I'm going to want it around about that big. Something like that. Now we could create a motion tween. I don't know, did we do that in the original? I don't think we did.
No, we didn't.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, you know, if you want to go nuts, you could sort of do one of the many and various effects we've used just there. But for the purpose of demonstration, we're just going to leave that there. And really it was just there to show the use of the fairly sort of universal free transform tool. Very handy to use. So let's have a look at what we've got. Beautiful.
Wow.
Isn't that fabulous?
That is fabulous.
That's a knockout. Look, I know keen-eyed people out there are going to look at that and say, oh, there's something, why didn't you move that in? We know. We know it's not perfect. You can fix stuff like that. We're going to move on. Okay? It's just the basic stuff. So, one more time, let's revel in our magnificence and check that out. Yes, it's working beautifully. I'm going to save the file. Okay. Now, please, this is very important to understand. People who are new to Flash, even people who are old to Flash, don't understand this. It's currently saved as a Flash file, an FLA. That you can't use on the web. It's no good. It's only useful for editing in Flash. Okay, it looks cool, but you can't just throw it onto a web page. You have to convert this now into a file that does work on a web page, namely a shockwave file. And the easiest way to deal with that is to go into the File menu and go and have a darn good look at not export. That's there to trick you. We'll come back to what that's all about some other time. Let's check out publish settings. Oh, and it looks pretty scary, but it's not. This is the stuff you need to know about when you're ready to get your stuff working on a web page. Now, the default setting, cleverly named default, okay, gives you a Flash file and a HTML file. You may also notice there's several other options there. You've got a GIF, a JPEG, PNG, a Windows blinking Nexy stupid thing, and a Mac projector file. The defaults for the time being are all we need. They're going to be all you need for most of what you do with Flash. Okay, probably handy to know that there are these other options there to export, but we're interested in these two. If we have a look at the other two little tabs here up in this window, it brings a little bit more detail about what these things are going to do when they export. And this is somewhat important to know about. In the Flash tab, okay, so for the publish settings for the Flash, it's telling us what type of compliance this file is going to have. So that is what it's going to play back in on the web when we make this. Now the default for this thing, default setting is Flash Player 10. If you click on that, you'll see there's a whole bunch of older versions of Flash. There's also some other things. We've got Adobe Air, we've got Flash Lite, blah, 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 blah. You're going to mainly want to live in the land of Flash players, presumably. And the different numbers there are referring to older browser technology, and this is the latest at the moment at the time of making this tutorial, Flash 10. So, depending on the web project you're working with, you may need to find out whether you need compliance with an earlier Flash player. Some folks out there in the land of the web don't have the latest stuff. They've got old stuff. So it may be really important that you can get your stuff to work on an older Flash player. Anyway, that's what this stuff's all about. For this exercise, it's quite okay to leave it on Flash Player 10. But just be aware of what this represents for future stuff. Righto. We started off this tutorial with ActionScript 2, and so it's indicating that if we had been using any scripting, this would export with ActionScript 2 compliance. Okay? Now, we haven't used any scripting. We're not going to go into great detail explaining what this is all about. In a later tutorial, we're going to modify this thing and add buttons to it and all sorts of stuff, where we will go into further descriptions about the difference between ActionScript 2 and ActionScript 3. For the moment, it's not going to matter. So if you're just making a standard, simple web banner that has no interactivity and no buttons, don't worry about it. Righto, HTML. In the HTML tab, it's assuming you want to make from Flash a simple, basic web page, okay, with nothing on it other than your Flash banner. Most folks are not going to do that. They're going to have other stuff on their web page. But again, for the purposes of this exercise, to quickly check whether your stuff works in a browser, you should just leave it on this default setting. So I'm going to hit OK to that. And then we're just going to go back through that menu, the file menu, and this time we're going to hit publish. So we checked the publish settings before, and now we're going to hit publish. And what that's done in a blink of an eye, it's just gone and created all that junk that we were just looking at in the publish settings window. So let's check it out. Righto. Let's expand that a bit. My messy desktop. What that's just made is this stuff. Now I've got a bunch of files sitting in here. Some things we used, some things we didn't. Just to explain really clearly, that thing there, Flash tutorial, is .fla is the Flash file that we were editing in Flash. That thing there, called flash tutorial.html, is a web page that it just made when we hit publish. And that bit there, flash tutorial.swf, is the shockwave file that it made when we hit publish. So the shockwave is the bit that's actually playing the Flash stuff, and the flash tutorial.html is the simple basic web page that it automatically made, so that if we double click that, we can see our fantastic little thing going over and over and over again. Now, keen-eyed observers amongst you will notice that's just playing over and over and over. And wouldn't it be cool to be able to get that to stop? So it just plays once. Well, we didn't do that because that requires a bit of scripting. And we're going to move on to that in a later exercise. But it does introduce one of the features, and some would say annoying features, of Flash, particularly web banners. They can be really annoying when they do stuff like that. Important to know that Flash will just keep cycling through whatever you've told it to do unless you put in some script to stop it. As I said, we're going to get to that later, but that essentially is how to create a really simple web banner with a whole bunch of different types of animation, and then how to export it in a file type that will actually work on the web.
That's really annoying.
Isn't it?
Stop that now.
I should. It's making me sort of see mysterious things. Anyway, that's about it for this. Look forward to a new tutorial showing you how to stop this blinking thing very soon.